The Thanksgiving table glowed with warmth, candlelight dancing on Eleanor Harper's perfectly roasted turkey and shimmering cranberry sauce. At 68, the retired librarian had poured her heart into this meal, her grandmother's silverware gleaming for 3 generations gathered in her home. But the air grew heavy when her son Nathan, 42, stormed in late, his boots thudding, his wife Lauren trailing with a strained smile. Their daughters grabbed tablets. Ignoring the ceramic pilgrim, Nathan's keys toppled, a treasure from a 1995 church fair. "You're late," Eleanor said softly, her voice steady but kind. Nathan scoffed, eyes on his phone. As she spoke of gratitude, he snapped, "Can we eat already?" Tension crackled. Then, in a heartbeat, his hand struck her cheek, a sharp, hollow slap that silenced the room. Child gasped. Silverware clattered. Eleanor touched the stinging mark, looked into the eyes of the son she'd raised, and said, "Thank you for showing me who you are." What would she do next? The answer would rewrite her legacy. Eleanor's dining room, bathed in the soft glow of tapered candles, was a testament to her meticulous care. The tablecloth, a crisp ivory linen embroidered with tiny autumn leaves, draped elegantly over the polished mahogany table. Each place setting was precise, her grandmother's silver forks aligned perfectly, napkins folded with quiet precision, and a centerpiece of fresh chrysanthemums adding a burst of gold and crimson. The turkey, golden and fragrant, sat carved on a platter, its steam curling upward like a whispered promise of togetherness. Beside it, sweet potatoes glistened with a maple glaze, and the cranberry sauce sparkled in a crystal bowl, catching the candlelight like a jewel. Eleanor, at 68, had spent decades perfecting this ritual, not just for tradition, but for love, a love she'd poured into her family, her home, her only son, Nathan. As a retired librarian, she'd always found solace in order, in the quiet satisfaction of a well-kept space. Tonight, 12 place settings represented 3 generations: her elderly neighbor Margaret, her cousin's family, her granddaughters, and Nathan's wife Lauren. It was a gathering meant to bind them, to stitch the years together with shared stories and warmth. But the harmony Eleanor had crafted began to fray the moment Nathan arrived. The front door slammed, its echo cutting through the soft chatter of guests. Nathan, 42, strode in with heavy, impatient steps, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. His dark jacket was unzipped, his face set in a scowl that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken grievances. Behind him, Lauren hovered, her lips pressed into a thin line, her makeup doing little to hide the strain in her expression. Their 2 daughters, aged 9 and 11, shuffled in, jackets half off, their eyes already glued to the glowing screens of their tablets. Nathan tossed his keys onto the entry table with a careless flick, the clatter sending a small, ceramic pilgrim, a keepsake from a 1995 church fair, tumbling to the floor. It didn't break, but the sound felt like a crack in the evening's fragile peace. Eleanor, standing at the kitchen counter, didn't flinch. She wiped her hands on a linen towel, its edges stitched with tiny pumpkins, and folded it neatly beside the platter. "You're late," she said, her voice gentle, not accusing, just a quiet acknowledgement of fact. "I was starting to worry." Nathan scoffed, barely glancing at her as he shrugged off his jacket. "We got here when we could, traffic." His tone was sharp, dismissive, as if her concern was an inconvenience. Lauren stepped forward, offering a stiff hug, her arms barely touching Eleanor's shoulders. "It smells amazing," she murmured, her eyes darting to the floor, avoiding Eleanor's gaze. There was something hollow in the compliment, a politeness that felt rehearsed rather than heartfelt. Eleanor nodded, unsure whether to trust the words or the coldness beneath them. She gestured toward the dining room where guests were already seated, their voices a low hum of anticipation. "Let's sit," she said, leading the way with a smile that masked the unease curling in her chest. By 3:15 p.m., everyone was in place. Eleanor took her seat at the head of the table, her posture straight, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Across from her, Nathan slouched, his attention fixed on his phone, the blue light casting shadows on his face. The granddaughters sat to his left, their tablets propped against water glasses, the tinny sound of a game barely audible. Margaret, Eleanor's neighbor of 20 years, sat to her right, her frail hands resting on the table, her eyes warm but watchful. The other guests, cousins, their spouses, a family friend, filled the remaining chairs, their chatter softening as Eleanor cleared her throat. "I just want to say thank you," she began, her voice steady, carrying the weight of intention. "I know it's not always easy to gather, to make time, but this table, this moment means everything to me." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering on her granddaughters, then on Nathan. "I'm grateful for you all." Nathan didn't look up. "Can we eat already?" he snapped, his voice slicing through her words. "Some of us have places to be later." The room stilled, a ripple of discomfort passing through the guests. Margaret's fingers tightened on her napkin. One of the cousins shifted awkwardly in his seat. Eleanor's eyes flicked to her granddaughters, who glanced up from their screens, sensing the shift. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I just hope we can share one meal," she said softly, "without someone being unkind." The words were simple, but they landed like a challenge. Quiet and unyielding. That was all it took. Nathan shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor, a sound that grated like a warning shot. "Unkind?" He spat, his voice rising, sharp with indignation. "You're calling me unkind in front of everyone?" His face reddened, his hands clenching at his sides. Lauren reached for his arm, whispering, "Nathan, stop!" But he yanked it away, his eyes locked on Eleanor. "You always do this, Mom. Playing the martyr, acting like I'm the problem. You ruin everything. Every holiday, every damn time." Eleanor's voice remained calm, a steady anchor in the storm. "Please, lower your voice," she said, her eyes meeting his without flinching. He didn't. He stood, his chair tipping slightly, and strode toward her. The room froze, every breath held. In a heartbeat, his hand struck her cheek, a sharp, hollow slap that echoed like a dropped plate. It wasn't loud, just piercing, a sound that cut through the warmth of the room and left it cold. One of the granddaughters gasped, her tablet slipping to the table. A fork clattered as Margaret's hand trembled. Lauren muttered, "Oh, Nathan," but didn't move, her eyes wide with shock or shame. Eleanor stumbled sideways, catching herself on the chair, her fingers brushing the polished wood. She touched her cheek. Warm, no blood, just a stinging heat. Slowly she straightened, her gaze locking onto Nathan's. The son she'd rocked through sleepless nights, defended through school suspensions, loved through every mistake. The man who now stood before her, unapologetic, his chest heaving with anger. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but clear, each word deliberate, "for showing me exactly who you are." Nathan blinked, stunned by her calm, his fury faltering for a moment. "You're crazy," he muttered, turning on his heel and storming toward the door. Lauren scrambled after him, ushering the girls out, their tablets forgotten. The other guests sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to speak or flee. Eleanor reached for the serving spoon, scooped a small portion of mashed potatoes onto her plate, and took a bite. "Delicious," she said quietly, her smile a quiet defiance. The room remained frozen, but Eleanor moved forward, her resolve already taking shape. The morning after Thanksgiving, Eleanor Harper stood at her kitchen sink, the bruise on her cheek a dull purple smear beneath her right eye. The sun sliced through the blinds in thin golden stripes, illuminating the quiet chaos of last night's dinner. Empty wine glasses, a congealed bowl of cranberry sauce, and the faint scent of roasted turkey lingering in the air. At 68, Eleanor had always found comfort in routine, but this morning felt different, sharper. Her fingers traced the tender mark Nathan had left, not with tears, but with a clarity that burned. She didn't linger. Setting down the cold cloth she'd used to soothe the swelling, she picked up her phone and dialed Vanessa Cole, her attorney of 10 years. "Vanessa," she said, voice steady as the mahogany table in the next room. "I'm ready to rewrite my entire will." Vanessa's response was immediate, professional, yet warm. "This won't be simple, Eleanor, but it'll be final. Can you come in today?" Eleanor glanced at the bruise in the small mirror by the sink, her gray eyes unwavering. "I'll be there by noon." In Vanessa's office, a sleek downtown space with floor-to-ceiling windows, Eleanor sat across from a legal pad that bore her name in crisp black ink. Eleanor Harper, current testamentary structure. The document listed Nathan, her 42-year-old son, as executor, primary beneficiary, and co-signer on her savings account, her home, her life insurance. His name appeared on every page, a tether she'd once thought unbreakable. Vanessa, her glasses perched low on her nose, tapped the pad. "Is this still accurate?" Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not even close," she said. "He gets nothing. Not the house, not a dime, not a single spoon from my grandmother's set." Vanessa leaned back, her expression not one of judgment, but of quiet solidarity. "All right," she said, clicking her pen. "Let's restructure everything, but I need to walk you through what this means legally. Disinheriting a child, especially after an incident, requires precision to avoid challenges." Eleanor nodded, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her foot tapped faintly under the table, betraying a current of energy. "I want a behavior-based clause," she said. "Any instance of physical aggression, past or present, voids all rights. No reinstatement ever." Vanessa's brows lifted slightly, impressed by the specificity. "That's strong," she said, "but we'll need proof to make it ironclad. Do you have witnesses?" Eleanor's lips curved into a dry, almost amused smile. "10," she replied. "They all stayed for pie." Vanessa blinked, then jotted a note. "A full house at Thanksgiving? That's more than enough." She outlined the plan. A staggered disinheritance strategy, clean and specific, designed to be immune to contest. "The more airtight we make this," Vanessa said, "the less likely he'll even try." Eleanor's gaze drifted to the window where a crow perched on a ledge, its black eyes glinting in the sunlight. "Make Margaret the executor," she said. "My neighbor. She's seen everything." Vanessa nodded, her pen moving swiftly across the page. Back home, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Mom, I didn't mean it. Don't make this bigger than it is." She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button, but instead she opened her voice memo app. "November 25th, 8:03 a.m. EM, she recorded, her tone calm and professional. "Photographing right side facial contusion. Incident occurred approximately 3:17 p.m. yesterday. Witnesses present." She snapped 2 photos of the bruise, the purple, edged with yellow, and logged the time in her planner. Another buzz, Nathan's voicemail. "You pushed me, Mom. You always do." She saved it to a locked folder labeled Evidence, renaming the file Justification_1125 MP3. The act felt methodical, like shelving books in her old library, each piece of proof cataloged with care. She wasn't reacting, she was building. When Nathan and Lauren visited 2 days later, Eleanor was ready. She tucked a small audio recorder behind a napkin holder on the console table, its red light hidden by a flower arrangement. Nathan stood in her living room, arms crossed, his pressed shirt doing little to mask his coiled tension. Lauren perched on the edge of an armchair, her eyes darting between Eleanor's bruise and the floor. "We just wanted to clear the air," Nathan said, his voice clipped. Eleanor offered tea, her tone soft as ever. No one accepted. Lauren leaned forward, her voice low, almost pleading. "He's been stressed, Eleanor. Work, the kids. It's a lot. He doesn't always handle things well." Eleanor nodded, her hands folded in her lap. "I see," Nathan cut in. "You provoked it, Mom. You know how you can be." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. "How's that?" she asked, her voice flannel soft but edged with steel. "Controlling, judgmental," he said, shrugging. "Always something with you, like that speech at the table." Eleanor tilted her head. "The one where I asked for kindness." Lauren reached for Nathan's hand, but he pulled away. "You're twisting it," he muttered. For 32 minutes, they danced around accountability. Nathan never said sorry, never used her name, Only you, as if she were a problem to fix rather than a mother to face. Eleanor nodded at the right moments, asked nothing, argued nothing. She served pumpkin pie, lightly spiced, a touch of cinnamon. "You always like this," she said, sliding a slice toward Nathan. He didn't touch it. Lauren took one bite, then set her fork down. When they left, Eleanor locked the door behind them, retrieved the recorder, and stopped the audio. The tiny red light flickered off. In her study, she plugged it into her laptop, saved the file as Langford_visit_1125 MP3, and emailed it to Vanessa. She wrote, "Attached is the full audio from their visit, time-stamped, uninterrupted, no apology, no admission, just entitlement. This supports the behavioral clause and immediate next steps for the estate." Vanessa's reply came at midnight. "Confirmed. This adds weight. I'm initiating the estate transfer tomorrow. Nathan will be fully removed as successor deed holder." Eleanor sat back, reading the email twice, not for doubt, but to feel the severance settle. Outside, the wind rustled through pine trees, carrying the faint scent of winter. In her bedroom, the pie plate by the window still held traces of cinnamon. She didn't feel triumphant, only clear. The next morning, she pulled a fireproof box from her closet, the combination lock clicking like a small vow. Inside were folders: deed, will, Nathan's education, life policy. She spread them on the dining table, the same table where Nathan's slap had landed, and took a yellow highlighter from the drawer. With steady hands, she drew a thick line through his name wherever it appeared. The doorbell rang, but she didn't answer. She was already typing to Vanessa. Subject: urgent revision request. I'm ready to move forward with a full estate overhaul. Nathan is no longer named on any documents, past, present, or future. Please advise next steps. She hit send, shut her laptop, and looked out the window. The leaves scattered and winter waited. So did her resolve. Eleanor Harper's resolve hardened like the frost creeping over her garden as winter loomed. After rewriting her will with Vanessa Cole, stripping Nathan's name from every document, she felt a shift, not just in her legal protections, but in her vigilance. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a faint yellow by early December, but the clarity it brought remained sharp. At 68, Eleanor, the retired librarian, was no stranger to organizing chaos, and now she turned that skill inward, safeguarding not just her estate, but her privacy. The Thanksgiving slap had been a revelation, exposing Nathan's entitlement, and she suspected his betrayal ran deeper than a single act of violence. Her suspicion was confirmed when she opened an email from her bank, a routine statement that should have been mundane but wasn't. Tucked in the fine print was a pending loan application in her name, one she hadn't authorized. The signature, slanted and loopy, wasn't hers. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with a cold, burning clarity. Nathan had forged her name. Eleanor's first call was to the bank. "This is Eleanor Harper," she said, her voice calm but pointed like a blade wrapped in silk. "I did not authorize a loan application in my name. Remove it immediately and confirm in writing." The representative stammered, "Yes, ma'am, we'll correct it right away." By 10:17 a.m., an email arrived from the bank's compliance officer. "Dear Miss Harper, your name has been withdrawn from the application and all related records purged." Eleanor read it twice, not for doubt, but to anchor the moment. She forwarded it to Vanessa with a single line: "Found forged signature on loan app, Nathan's work." "Do we escalate?" Vanessa's reply was swift. "Yes, I'm drafting a fraud alert with a soft legal advisory. No charges yet, but this locks his financial credibility. Send everything." Eleanor scanned the document, attached a photo of the forged signature, and hit send. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, a sharp note that felt like a warning she no longer needed. Her next move was digital. Eleanor had always been cautious, but not tech-savvy, relying on Nathan years ago to set up her Wi-Fi and smart devices. Now, that trust felt like a trap. Her internet had been sluggish lately, pages loading slowly, her router blinking more than usual. She called Marie, a cybersecurity consultant and friend of her neighbor, Margaret, who arrived that afternoon with a rolling case and a calm demeanor. Over tea, Anne-Marie ran a diagnostic on Eleanor's network. "You've got a guest device connected," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's masked, spoofed to look like a tablet, linked to a burner Gmail." Eleanor's chest tightened, not with fear, but focus. "Is it mine?" she asked. Anne-Marie shook her head. "No, I traced the login. It's Nathan's." The words landed like the slap itself, sharp, undeniable. He'd been accessing her network, likely watching her activity, possibly intercepting account recovery emails. Eleanor's voice was steady. "Why?" Amari hesitated. "Could be monitoring your accounts, hoping to catch a password reset. Could be both." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Don't block it yet," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Leave it connected just long enough for me to plant something he thinks he's stealing." Amari raised an eyebrow but nodded, guiding Eleanor through the setup. They created a decoy file on her laptop labeled estate_draft_2023 PL, filled with dummy text about a non-existent trust. Eleanor placed it in a folder Nathan's device could access, a baited hook. She changed every password. "My house 2023, not your legacy. Eleanor rules 1125. Each was a cryptic vow, meaningless to anyone but her. She removed Nathan's access to her recovery emails, wiped his old login from her iPad, and reset every security question: first pet, mother's maiden name, street she grew up on, replacing them with phrases only she'd understand. Midas switched, 2023, not your PIN. Amari installed a firewall, enabled activity logging, and blocked Nathan's burner email. His ghost profile vanished from her network. "Clean slate," Amari said, sipping her tea. Eleanor smiled. "Mine again." Late that night, Eleanor sat in her study, the glow of her laptop casting shadows on the walls. She hadn't touched her old iPad in months, but Amari's sweep had revealed it was still logged into Nathan's iCloud account. She tapped through it carefully, her fingers steady. His iMessage app was syncing, a thread with Lauren open in the archive. "She's acting cold again," Nathan wrote. "Did you get into the bank account?" Lauren's reply: "Not yet. She's paranoid since Thanksgiving." Nathan: "She should be. You saw what she made me do." Lauren: "You slapped her in front of everyone, Nathan." "And they stayed for dessert?" "She'll cave." Nathan's response chilled her. "She'll be gone in a decade. We just have to smile till then." Eleanor's breath caught, not from pain, but from a surgical calm. She screenshot every message, zipped the file, and emailed it to Vanessa. Subject: digital evidence, intent, manipulation. Vanessa, see attached. This confirms premeditation and disregard. I want this in my file, top page. By sunrise, Vanessa replied, "Got it. This adds weight to the physical and financial abuse clauses." Full digital affidavit started. Amari returned the next day to finalize the sweep. They disconnected every smart device, doorbell camera, kitchen speaker, even the voice-activated lamp Eleanor rarely used. "No tracking, no listening," Amari said. "Only you." Eleanor handed her a fresh cup of tea, her voice steady. "Thank you." She reset the iPad herself, watching the screen go black, then light up again. Hers alone. She tucked it into her desk drawer like a weapon, cleaned and stored. The printer hummed to life, spitting out a crisp sheet with Nathan's message. "She'll be gone in a decade. We just have to smile till then." Eleanor clipped it to a red legal binder, labeled "Y," the word scrawled in sharp capitals. She slid the binder into her fireproof safe, the lock clicking shut like a verdict. Eleanor's next call was to her credit union, where Nathan had once been a co-signer on her savings account. "I need to verify access," she said. The teller's voice faltered. "Nathan Harper's access was revoked yesterday, per your attorney's request." Eleanor exhaled, not surprised but relieved. She called her accountant next, redirecting the $12,000, 0 cents annual grant Nathan had received from the Harper Family Fund, meant for his entrepreneurial ventures. "Split it," she said. "Half to a women's re-entry scholarship at the local college, half to a hospice training grant." The accountant paused, then said softly, "That's a powerful shift." Eleanor's reply was firm. It's not revenge, it's repair. The forged loan, the burner email, the messages. They weren't just betrayals, they were proof. Nathan had used her name, her trust, her network. Now she was taking them back, brick by brick, bite by bite. Eleanor Harper's home, once a stage for betrayal, began to feel like a sanctuary again. After severing Nathan's access to her network, her accounts, and her trust, the 68-year-old retired librarian turned her focus outward. The forged loan application, the burner email, and Nathan's chilling messages, "She'll be gone in a decade, we just have to smile till then," hadn't broken her. They'd sharpened her purpose. The bruise from Thanksgiving had faded, but its lesson lingered, fueling a mission to protect not just herself but others. Eleanor wasn't content to stop at her own safety. She wanted to rewrite what legacy meant, not just for her, but for every woman who'd been told to endure in silence. With Vanessa Cole's legal framework securing her estate and Amari's cybersecurity sweep locking down her digital life, Eleanor felt a new kind of strength, one that demanded action beyond her own walls. She sat at her dining table, the same one where Nathan's slap had landed, and opened her laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank document, waiting for her to begin. Her first step was to transform the Harper Family Fund, a trust she and her late husband had created to support Nathan's ambitions. The $12,000 0-cent annual grant, once a lifeline for his half-hearted ventures, had been redirected at her command. Now it would fund two new initiatives: a scholarship for women over 60 returning to education after domestic trauma, and a hospice training grant in memory of her husband, David. Eleanor called her accountant, her voice steady. "Split the funds evenly," she said. "No oversight, just impact. Let the applicants tell their stories. They'll know what to say." The accountant, a soft-spoken woman who'd known Eleanor for years, paused. "This is big, Eleanor. It's going to change lives." Eleanor's reply was quiet but firm. "It already has." She hung up, her eyes drifting to the fireproof safe where her red binder, labeled Y, held Nathan's damning words. The money wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Eleanor's next move was public. She contacted the National Elder Justice Foundation, inspired by their work. After reading about it online, she proposed a public service announcement to share her story, not for pity, but for power. They agreed, sending a documentarian named Selene to her home. Celine arrived with a compact camera and a gentle question: "Are you sure you want to do this?" Eleanor's response was unflinching: "I'm not here to bleed, I'm here to build." They filmed in her kitchen, the same space where she'd prepared the Thanksgiving turkey. Eleanor didn't rehearse. She spoke plainly, her gray hair tucked behind her ears, her voice steady as she recounted the slap, the betrayal, the forged signature. She shared the bruise photo, the screenshot of Nathan's message, the audio of his non-apology. "This isn't vengeance," she said, looking into the lens. "It's documentation. No one should wait for permission to protect themselves." The PSA ended with silence, white text on a black screen. "Every elder deserves safety, not silence." The foundation broadcast it nationwide, and within days, emails poured in. A woman from Ohio wrote, "I saw your story. I called a lawyer today." Another from Nevada, "You gave me the courage to say no." Eleanor saved each one in a folder labeled "Unsilenced Voices," her heart swelling with quiet pride. Her dining table became a hub, not for strange holidays, but for new connections. Margaret, her neighbor and now executor of her will, brought lemon tarts and ideas for expanding the scholarship. Clara, her niece and successor, joined them, her legal studies fueling discussions about protective clauses. Celine returned to share a rough cut of the PSA, and together they planned a companion guide for elder justice. Eleanor wrote it herself, a step-by-step manual titled "Inheritance and Abuse: A Survivor's Framework." It outlined how to remove power of attorney, craft behavior-based clauses, and law coercion without raising suspicion. She included lines she knew too well. "You'll regret this when you're older. After all I've done for you." Her answers were bold. "Aging isn't consent. Pain doesn't owe gratitude." The guide went live on a Monday, and by evening, the feedback was overwhelming. A woman from Sarasota wrote, "You gave me a beginning." Another from Tacoma, "He hurt me with silence, not fists. Thank you for the words." Eleanor didn't reply. She didn't need to. They were finishing their own stories. Eleanor's legacy was no longer tied to blood. She redefined it with every choice. At a follow-up meeting with Vanessa, they finalized the new will. Margaret was executor, Clara the successor, and the scholarships were enshrined as permanent trusts. No bloodline clause, Eleanor said, her voice clear. Only behavior matters. Care, presence, protection. Vanessa nodded, adding a final clause. Any attempted emotional manipulation or legal contest would void all claims, no exceptions. Eleanor signed with a gold ink pen, its shimmer a quiet declaration. "There's nothing left for him to take," Vanessa said, sealing the document. Eleanor smiled, not from triumph, but from structure. She framed the revised testament notice and hung it beside a 1998 photo of her and a teenage Nathan, his arms slung across her shoulders. The contrast was stark, but she didn't remove the photo. It was a reminder, not a regret. Her home reflected this new legacy. The dining room, once heavy with Nathan's presence, now hosted chosen family. Margaret brought her famous cornbread stuffing, questionable but loved. Clara shared law school stories, her enthusiasm infectious. Celine documented their gatherings not for broadcast but for memory, capturing laughter where tension once reigned. Eleanor stood at the head of the table one evening, holding a slender envelope. "This is my will," she said, passing a copy to each guest. "No drama, just clarity. You're in it because you showed up with care, not genetics." Margaret raised her glass. "To boundaries and beginnings." The clink of glasses echoed, and Eleanor's heart beat steady, not with pain but with purpose. The PSA's impact grew. The foundation invited Eleanor to speak at the National Elder Protection Conference. She prepared no speech, only a precedent. "I didn't just change my will," she told Vanessa. "I changed what family means." The conference loomed, a platform to amplify her voice, but Eleanor felt no nerves, only focus. She was no longer the woman who'd stumbled from a slap. She was the woman who documented it, redirected it, and built something unbreakable from it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. "Nathan's struggling. Can we talk?" Eleanor stared at the screen, then closed it without replying. Some messages were just reminders, not conversations. She walked to her garden, the rosemary bush swaying in the breeze, and breathed deeply. Legacy wasn't Nathan's inheritance. It was her autonomy, shared with those who'd earned it. A year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, Eleanor Harper's home glowed with new warmth. The dining table, once a battleground where Nathan's slap had echoed, now hosted a chosen family. Margaret with her lemon tarts, Clara with her law school dreams, and Celine the documentarian with a bottle of Pinot Grigio. At 68, Eleanor, the retired librarian, stood at the head of the table, her gray hair catching the candlelight. The air smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon, but the weight of last year's betrayal was gone, replaced by laughter and the clink of glasses. She raised her own, her voice steady. "To chosen family," she said, "and to boundaries that set us free." The room toasted, and Eleanor's heart, once bruised, felt whole. Her scholarships for women escaping trauma and her hospice training grant, funded by the redirected Harper Family Fund, had already changed lives. Emails from recipients filled her unsilenced voices folder, each one a testament to her impact. Eleanor's story rippled beyond her table. The National Elder Justice Foundation's PSA, her voiceover images of that fading bruise, had reached millions. At the National Elder Protection Conference, she took the stage not as a victim, but as a strategist. "I didn't just rewrite my will," she said, her navy blazer sharp, her gold cufflinks glinting. "I rewrote what family means." The audience stood, their applause not for pain, but for her precision. A woman in her 60s touched Eleanor's arm afterward, whispering, "You gave us words we didn't know we could say." Eleanor nodded. Say them loud. Back home, her foyer smelled of lavender polish. A note from Margaret on the counter. You built peace. Proud doesn't cover it. The framed testament notice hung beside her guest book, its pages filled with new names, Nathan's absence, a silent choice. Her legacy grew. A legal journal turned her case into a study, Legacy Rewritten, Autonomy Over Inheritance, taught at 3 law schools. Eleanor led a mentorship circle for elder advocates, teaching women to make their signatures louder than their silence. Her health, steady until it wasn't, began to fade quietly. A doctor suggested hospitalization, but Eleanor refused. I'll close this life here, she said, in her home, now the Langley Claus Fund headquarters. She sat in her reading chair, the garden blooming beyond the window, and recorded her final video will. If you're watching, I died protected, she said, her silk scarf soft around her shoulders. I didn't wait for him to change. I changed the ending. To women watching, you don't need permission, just documentation. To Nathan, she added, you're not in this, you never will be. Nat King Cole played low as she passed 2 days later, her breath steady, her peace complete. Vanessa filed the final estate transfer, no contest, no challenge. Nathan, unnotified by policy, not pettiness, was erased from her legal record. No executor rights, no burial authority. The house became a hub for the Langley Claus Fund, a plaque outside reading "In memory of women who filed instead of staying quiet." Inside, the guestbook stayed open, new names joining Margaret's and Clara's. Eleanor's framed photo, her smile from the day Nathan lost everything, hung in the hall, captioned, "The day I chose myself." Her final letter, encrypted in her vault, read, "You saw my love and mistook it for permission. I was never silent. I was building. My legacy is my autonomy." Eleanor hadn't disowned Nathan. She documented him out, leaving a haven for those who chose care over blood.